How we doing, class? Today we're talking about cantilevers. If you're wondering why I look like a rubber duck, it's the closest thing I had to a lab jacket. So let's just imagine it's the 90s. You're taking an after-work program at the community college, and your broke professor walks in, and this is what you got. Okay, make context for the whole thing, you know. So we're just gonna be talking about the basics, the carpentry basics of a cantilever, why we use it, and that sort of thing. So what a cantilever is anytime your framing members or your structural members are extending past the load-bearing point. For your house, you have your foundation wall right here, and then your framing members go out like that. This point right here is the cantilever. There's a few different reasons we would want to do a cantilever. My most useful use for a cantilever is I build a lot of decks. So I'll put a cantilever 2 foot in from the edge of the deck, and that allows my span from the ledger where I'm attached to the house to the beam to be shorter, which allows for less deflection. That's the bouncing and the bow that's going to happen with the weight that's in the middle of the joist. 2x10s can typically span about 15 feet pine. 15'7" or so. So if we max this all the way out, let's just round it to 16 foot. If we made this 16 foot, that's 8 foot to the center of this. If we go in 2'6" from that 16 foot, we're at 13'6". The center of that is 8 foot. The center of this is 6'9". So just by bringing this in 2 foot 6 inches, 30 inches, we're making the maximum deflection point 1 foot 3 inches smaller, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about 50 pounds per square foot, it adds up over the span. I think this is important for decks, mainly because we build to like a 50 pound per square foot load. This really helps with achieving a maximum load. So, whoa, chill. I have heard people argue that they don't like the cantilevered system because the potential for uplift. It's that 2 foot area past the beam. It's a lot lighter than this previous section. If there was a strong enough gust of wind, in theory, it could potentially help lift that deck up. But we use hangers to connect the for the joist to beam connection. So I'm not super worried about that. We tie them together with metal. I much prefer it. I think it makes a sturdier product. When you walk, there's not as much bounce. And it also gives you the freedom for your handrail posts to go wherever and block around them, because you don't have any post actually coming into your joist bays. Everything is below the joist bays, and your joists are sitting directly on top of that beam. That's obviously not the only reason why we use them. And a lot of people's floor plans, you see bay windows, and that's usually cantilevered. So what that would look like, I'll try to make this one a little bit nicer for you guys. So let's say this is your foundation wall, right? Shoo! Not the best handwriting. Let's do blue as your joist. So these are all your common joists that are coming to the foundation wall. Then you'll have a few that go like that. So you have your band board, and it'll come out like that. And then obviously this is the beam underneath your house. So the reason why we would do a cantilever in this aspect is to basically add an additional space without messing up the floor plan here. So in this area, a lot of people put like the cubbies, you know, they put benches and such. So you'd have your windows right here, and then, you know, you could have your little cubby right here with the lid that flips up, all that fancy stuff. You can do all that without messing with any of your floor space on the rest of your house. Another common use for the cantilever is going to be like balconies. Say you have a little one-story house, you know, and you got your front porch area. The second story, if you have a balcony up here, you don't want to have to run posts down into this roof because that's just going to create a spot where water could potentially leak. So a lot of times on apartment buildings or second story balconies or things of that sort, they do it to eliminate the need for a post or an actual bearing point down here. Another thing, I'm not sure if it's common everywhere, but in split level houses, they will have half of the house cantilevered about 2 feet from the foundation wall. I imagine it's just to reduce the size of the footprint itself, but expand the upper floor spaces. Some people do this for aesthetics. I'm not really sure that I love the way it looks for that purpose, but I think it is handy as far as practical use. All right, so another useful aspect of the cantilever, if you're trying, say you're building on a hillside or a cliffside, there's a massive grade that you're trying to beat. Say this is the parking area or the working area. If you do a cantilever towards the slope, that allows you to get closer to this area without having to disturb the soil that's right next to where the slope starts, and the lower headspace, headroom, whatever. If you frame up everything first to then load your piers on, digging that right there is going to be a whole lot harder than digging one back here. So this kind of brings us into the thing of how far can a cantilever go. So steel and wood are obviously going to be different. Your typical wood products, the non-engineered wood products like your 2x10s, you have a maximum of a quarter of the previous span, but they typically don't like to see like more than like 2 foot. 2'6" would be like the maximum I've done. The reason for that is because they don't want, if you go too far out this way, you're now making it like a seesaw, whereas the weight that's on, if you have a bunch of people on this side of the deck, there could be lifting force on this side, making the deck want to pull from the ledger. Alright, so that is the very basics of cantilevers. Obviously in construction with steel, your rules of cantilevers, you know, it's more of like a 2/3 rather than like a 3/4 of, or 1/4 of previous span. It's more like 1/3 of previous span. So it can definitely get pretty complex, and the reasons for using them can get complex. This is the basic carpentry version, and I'm sure you can pull something from it. I don't know. Either way, if it helped you, do the thing that you know helps me, and we'll see you next time.